When we met in closed session, we said that was before the passage of the second reading, the tax reform bills. We had set up these committees before we read the bill for the second time and committed it to the Committee on Finance for further legislative actions. It was agreed that that committee will, in the event of any gray area, meet with members of the executive. I can recall putting principal officers, because this will also exclude presiding officers. So we had a 10-man committee headed by Senator Akpabio, the minority leader. If we had principal officers, it would be headed by the Senate leader, not by Senator Mongunu in terms of seniority. So that will also have to be corrected. Senator Ashiru, you are here. Senator Ashiru, listen to me. It is not just a function of Senator Mongunu. It is a function of the fact that when we met in closed session, before we passed the tax reform bills for second reading, before we had second reading, we set up this committee that in the event of gray areas, we will arrange a meeting with the necessary quarters of the executive for them to meet and sort out the gray areas and revert to the Senate. There was no time we said principal officers should be members of that committee. That was why we put the minority leader as the chairman. If we said the principal officers should be members of that committee, it is not the minority leader that would have been chairman. Do you now understand me? But, am I speaking the same thing that you took part in? So this is not in line with what we agreed. Otherwise, you would have been. So I would suggest that you request that we change 3B 2 to distinguished Senator Kakashewu stand, and then we delete 11 to enable Senator Akpabio remain the chairman of the committee as I agreed in closed session. That was what was agreed. Please, distinguished Senator Oji Takalo.
Mr. President, you are very right. That was what was agreed. Ranking, you cannot make members of the leadership of the Senate, when the Senate leader is there, minority cannot lead. What we agreed is that Akpabio will be the chairman.
Yes.
And we have met also, the committee met on its own. So you're absolutely right. And we should start doing what is right on the table. You are right, please.
God bless you. So now, leader of the Senate, the committee has met a couple of times. No time that the Senate said that principal officers should be members of that committee. It would not have been headed by Senator Akpabio because of ranking and because of seniority. So you go ahead to correct 3B2.
Mr. President,
request for us to delete.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, I believe actual contention here whatsoever. May I, Mr. President and esteemed colleagues, just move that we delete section 3B, and in doing that also that we leave section 3B, that we delete section 3B11, and in doing that we leave section 3B2 as it is. Senator Mongunu, Mr. President, our decision to make the minority leader chairman was to show our transparency.
Sorry, are we disagreeing?
Yes.
Who is the chief whip of the Senate? If it's in the committee that he will be chairman, and that when we met in closed session,
yes,
we did not include principal officers. Therefore, we should delete section 3B2. Senator Mongoro should not be in that committee, and then we should delete 3B11, adding all principal officers of the Senate, because the committee is headed by the minority leader. It's very clear. We don't need to replace it with Senator Kaka or anybody.
Yeah, Mr. President.
So we leave it as a 9-man committee headed by Senator Akpabio.
No, that would mean the Northeast is not represented at all. Per geopolitical zone.
So you can.
And then we adopted the chairman of finance, appropriation, and national planning. Other than that, the 6 members were 1 per geopolitical zone. So, sir, we chose the minority leader. So you actually suggested to show our transparency. That's why we say minority should head. Senator Mongoro was brought in, as was announced by you, Your Excellency, to represent the Northeast.
It was an anomaly.
Not as a principal.
I just told you that.
Okay, so we will then substitute Senator Shehu Kaka?
Yes.
Okay.
Replace it with Senator Shehu Kaka.
I so move, sir.
Yes, minority leader.
There has been made to the votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 4th December 2024.
The motion has been moved by the minority leader that the votes and proceedings of the Senate in respect of page 611, please look at it, page 611, setting up an ad hoc committee to meet with some members of the executive and headed by the Senator Patrick Abamoro. We should delete or replace the name of Senator Mohamed Tahir Mongolo with the name of Senator Kagashewu to represent the Northeast interests, and then we should delete 3B11, including principal officers. Those in support of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. So please replace Senator Mongolo with Senator Kakashewu and delete principal officers. Senator Abamoro, you are still the chairman, and continue your work, and then you revert to the Senate as necessary. Page 612.
Says the Senate or the House of Representatives may appoint a committee of its members for such special or general purpose as in its own opinion will be better regulated and managed by means of such a committee, and may, by resolution, regulation or otherwise, as it thinks fit, delegate any function exercisable to it to any such committee, as was done on the floor of this Parliament yesterday and ratified through our votes and proceedings today, Mr. President. Subsection 4 of that same section 62 says, nothing in this section shall be construed as authorizing such house to delegate to a committee the power to decide whether a bill shall be passed into law or to determine any matter which it is empowered to determine by resolution under the provisions of this Constitution. But the committee may be authorized to make recommendations to the Senate or the House on any such matter. Mr. President, the reason for all these constitutional points of order that I have raised is simply because I watched the Arise News last night.
Is that the television or radio?
Arise television news. And what was reported was that this hallowed chamber had suspended further consideration of the tax reform bills before the Senate. The reporter even invited the governor of Nasarawa State and pointedly told the governor that now that the Senate had withdrawn, he used the word withdrawn, this tax reform bills, which Arise News described as conundrum, suggesting that they were confusing, they were problematic. What will you say, Mr. Governor? Are you happy that these bills have been withdrawn? And the governor said, I am not just happy because the bills have been withdrawn, but I'm happy because this will now give us a chance for all of us to discuss. Sir.
Arise News.
Yes, sir.
Asked the governor of Nasarawa State.
Yes.
Whether he was happy.
Yes, sir.
That the tax reform bills
have been
withdrawn by the Senate.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, what am I trying to say here? We do not move from one TV station to another. The privilege that we have is the floor of the Senate. This is where we do our deliberations. This is where we make the law. This is where we do effective representation of our people. And if you have issues to clarify, this is also the floor that we have, rather than issuing press statements. Mr. President, we just passed our votes and proceedings. We have just passed our votes and proceedings, which is a reflection of our deliberations of the previous legislative day, being yesterday. Nowhere in our votes and proceedings was it stated that we suspended further deliberations on the tax reform bill, because we did not. And I felt it would be important to place on record that this Senate did not suspend
or withdraw.
I will address that later, sir. This Senate did not suspend and does not intend to suspend deliberations, consideration of the tax reform bills. As to withdraw, Mr. President, this is simply my response. It was a misunderstanding of the legislative process for anybody to have even reported that we had withdrawn the bills. The bills were executive bills transmitted to us by the executive arm of government through the office of Mr. President. It's only the executive arm that can withdraw these bills. They are not private member bills sponsored by any senator. So no senator is going to withdraw the bill. And there is no reason for these bills to be withdrawn. In a legislative process, it is normal that some people will have concern. It is normal that people will sit around those concerns and discuss. That is why, in its wisdom, this Senate, in referring this matter to the Senate Committee on Finance, gave them as much as 6 weeks. Our instruction was that deliberate, organize, public hearing, and submit your report not later than 6 weeks. It might not be up to 6 weeks, but if they choose to be up to 6 weeks, nobody will quarrel with them. 6 weeks is long enough in a country that wants progress for a consensus to be reached. For anybody who has concern to sit down and allow such concern to be addressed in a variety of public interest. And in any case, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, we are continuing with the deliberation, with the consideration of this bill. We took all I expected the media to report yesterday, which was well reported by some sections of the media, was that the Senate at its plenary session yesterday took a further legislative action in the consideration of the bill. And what was the further legislative action that we took? From northwest of Adamu Aleros, through the north central of Abamoros, to the southeast of Ojiuzo Kalus, we drew out people, distinguished senators, from each geopolitical zone, and we constituted them into an ad hoc committee to, on our behalf, further interface. We were clear about what we were doing. The Senate Committee on Finance is in charge of public hearing, but we set up an ad hoc committee as a further legislative action to, on our behalf, interface. Even the president of the country, called on us to please, interface with the office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, which also we would have done in our public hearing. But even then, the executive requested for that. And we have set up an ad hoc committee to do that. So while the Finance Committee is working on its timeline, planning for the public hearing, we want this committee to also quickly engage. And the Deputy Senate President, yesterday in announcing this committee on your behalf, also said the ad hoc committee should treat this matter with urgency, with this power, that the meeting should start from today. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, the meeting started yesterday. So, the essence of what I am saying is that it's important that members of public are patient with us. They understand the legislative process that we have to follow. They understand our role in the Constitution. Any attempt from any quarter to intimidate the Parliament will be undemocratic, and we will not allow ourselves to be distracted. But we will encourage consensus, we will encourage discussions, engagement at all levels. But we cannot be bullied into adopting a certain procedure. As far as we are concerned, the tax reform bills are alive in this hallowed chamber. They are receiving consideration at various levels, and we are open to discussions, to negotiations, to interface. But let it not be said anywhere that we suspended further consideration of these bills. And also, it would be laughable for anybody to also think or say or report that the bills were withdrawn. Because, like I said, there are executive bills that can only be withdrawn by the executive. And there's no reason to do so. Because these bills, we believe, are in overriding public interest, and will do everything possible to ensure that across geopolitical interests, across, political parties, across every religious interest, everybody that has concern, civil society, everybody that has concern is given a chance to contribute to the passage of these laws. I thank you, Mr. President, and I conclude by saying that the tax reform bills for us are a work in progress, and we have the next 6 weeks to do this and finalize and pass it. Thank you, Mr. President.
To elaborate on the point of order, you came under Order 42 and also the constitutional provisions. And the Constitution is the ground norm. We can't argue with the Constitution. And Order 42 says that we should not engage in debate. We should not also bring about any controversial matter. But I must say that from your explanation, it will appear that Arise Television was totally misled into thinking that the bills were suspended or withdrawn by the Senate. Because I watched that news when the governor of Nasarawa was asked, now that the bills have been withdrawn, are you happy? The National Assembly, we were all elected to do our work. And that is the work of lawmaking in the overall interest of Nigerians. We do not do our work through social media, neither do we do it through any committee or congregation of the church or of any forum or of any nature. We do our work according to our conscience in the best interest of Nigerians. And the processes of lawmaking must be further explained to the public. The moment the bills went through second reading in the Senate, it simply means that the bills are alive. The next procedure is for the Committee on Finance to commence the process of consultations and public hearings with a view to bringing recommendations back to this hallowed chamber. But in the wisdom of the Senate yesterday, we had, in a closed session, set up a committee to be headed by the minority leader before the passage of the second reading. And we said, in the event that some people are either uneducated on some aspects of the bill, or confused, or there are gray areas to be sorted out, they should interface with the necessary executive quarters, from the chairman of Federal Inland Revenue Service to the Attorney General of the Federation, and if need be, even Mr. President. That committee was an internal mechanism of the Senate, different from the Committee on Finance. And I think that was what was announced yesterday, that that committee should immediately move into work. They should move into action, since there seems to be some gray areas to be sorted out. And I want to thank the distinguished Senator Abamoro, the chairman of the committee, because as soon as that announcement was made yesterday, he immediately started consultations. In fact, he has a meeting today that he has set up to enable him fast-track the process so that the chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance and members of the committee can commence public hearings either next week or as soon as practicable. Therefore, your point of order clearly explaining that the bills are alive, have not been suspended, the actions have not been suspended, the bills have not been withdrawn, and the bills have passed second reading in the Senate, and further legislative actions are taking place, including the setting up of this other committee. All those points are hereby sustained. Yes.
Point of order.
This is Senator Zonaso. Communication. I just want to read part 6. He says it is pertinent to state that the government has nothing sinister to warrant the suggestions that the process is being rushed. And you can see we gave our committee 6 weeks, so you can't say we are rushing the process of legislation. And if 6 weeks is not enough, we will extend the time for the committee. So this is executive communication. In line with the established legislative procedure, the federal government welcomes meaningful inputs that can address whatever gray areas there may be in the bill or in the bills. In this vein, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has already directed the Federal Ministry of Justice and relevant agencies and officials to work on the drafts, or who worked on the drafts, to work closely with the National Assembly with a view to ensuring that all genuine concerns are addressed before the bills are finally passed by the National Assembly. So what was done yesterday was in line with even the directive of Mr. President. The Agro Committee is working in line with the directive of the President. And it also shows that this Senate is composed of men of wisdom and foresight. Before even the President gave this directive, we had already, before we passed our second reading, set up an ad hoc committee in the event of any gray area. So if there is any governor, or any stakeholder in Nigeria, where no matter whether the person is a religious leader or a businessman that has problem with the bill, you know where to go to. Public hearing. The Senate will not be bullied. We are doing our work in the interest of Nigerians. And by the time we come out with our final position, it will reflect the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians. And not only that, any reform that we can make, painful as the reform may be, so long as this Senate is convinced that it is in the interest of Nigerians, we will go ahead with it with a view to bringing our economy on a forward march in support of the administration. But we will not also shy away from deleting or abrogating or stopping whatever we feel is not in the public interest. But for the tax reform bills, we believe that there are too many provisions there that would definitely help Nigerians. You can't imagine what it means for businesses that earn less than 50 million not to pay tax. You can't imagine what it means for multiplicity of taxes to be abrogated. You can't imagine what it means for people who earn less than the minimum wage or even minimum wage not to pay tax. So the exemptions are such that up to 100 million Nigerians will benefit from these tax reform bills. So let's not listen to social media. Let's not listen to Arise television. And I hope they are well guided with the explanation of the Senate leader. Yes, the Senator also.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In the Senate, with your kind permission, Mr. President, may I read Rule 13?
You may read it out.
Senators shall attend the sitting of the Senate properly dressed in non-traditional and formal attire. Mr. President, I've observed that one of us, Comrade Adam Oshumole, is not properly dressed. Yesterday he wore Babariga with a cap that fitted him, but today he reversed back to wear a comrade uniform. And this is not a chamber for comrades. Besides, Mr. President, he's not properly dressed. So you may wish to intervene, Mr. President. Thank you.
So,
Order 55, Rule 13.
Order 55. Order 55:13 says, Senators shall attend the sittings of the Senate properly dressed in non-traditional and formal attires. Senators shall attend Senate proceedings properly dressed in non-traditional attires and non-traditional attires and formal attires. I want to say that I've noted the order raised by the civil Senator Sunaso, but even looking at Senator Adam Oshumole with the hat very properly dressed, I want to, with due respect, say I've noted. Point of order. Yes, point of order. Who? Point of order.
I come under Order 41, and urgent.
Yes.
Mr. President, this motion is on Order 41.
41. Only? 41. Are you referring to Order 41 and 51?
51.
Or Order 41 alone?
41 and 51.
I'm sure you are referring to two orders, 41 and 51.
51.
Yes.
51 says, notice shall not be dispensed with in the case of a motion or in respect of any other proceeding for which notice is required except with the consent of the President of the Senate and the general assent of the senators present.
And you give us more summary of what you intend to.
Mr. President, this motion is on the need for special intervention by the Senate to urge the Federal Ministry of Works to expedite action and complete the rehabilitation of the Umuahia-Ekote-Ekpene Federal Road to relieve the suffering of Nigerian motorists and address insecurity in the general area. I remain Austin Akpabio, representing Abia Central Senatorial District. Senate notes that the Homo
don't be so fast.
Sir?
If you look at the provisions of Order 51 in respect of any other proceedings for which notice is required, except with the consent of the President of the Senate and the general assent of the senators. So this notice we are talking about, you need the consent of your colleagues. So you may be seated so that I hear from them.
Yes.
Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. To our dear colleague, the Civil Senator Akpabio, and also in defense of our rules, Senator Akpabio had raised this issue yesterday. It came under Order 41, and it was ruled with the leave of the Senate that this matter should come up today, being the next legislative day. This matter was supposed to have been submitted to him, to the Secretariat, this motion, to have been placed on the other paper as a substantive motion for today. So it cannot come on a second day to still come and raise the same issue under Order 4151, because it was raised yesterday under Order 41, and we took the leave of the Senate for this matter to be brought today as a substantive motion. A substantive motion would have been a motion he had submitted to the Secretariat yesterday and placed on the other paper. So, Mr. President, in order that we protect our rules and this does not become a precedent, I will most respectfully say that the matter should be considered on the next legislative day as a substantive motion. So it should be directed to submit it to the Committee on Rules and Business. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is to proceed with your motion, but through substantive motion. In other words, you have to submit it to the Secretariat to be reflected in our order paper. Do you have it now?
Yes, Excellency.
Okay, so please pass it to the clerk so that we'll take it on the next legislative date. Is it the view of the Senate that it be allowed to submit same for the next legislative date? Those in support say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. So proceed to pass it so that they'll put it for the next day of proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other,
And with a permission, I read, any senator may rise at any time to speak upon a matter of privilege suddenly arising, and he shall be prepared to move without notice a motion declaring that a contempt or breach of privilege has been committed, or referring the matter to the Committee of Ethics and Privileges. But if the matter is raised in Committee of the whole Senate, the chairman shall leave the chair to report progress. Mr. President, I believe my privilege as a senator has been breached because we have reviewed the votes and proceedings of yesterday, and many of us did not receive a copy. It has been amended, and the leader, in rising on his own point of order, quoted copiously from the votes and proceedings of yesterday, which I don't have. Which nobody has? Well, some few people have it. But Mr. President, the issues that the leader raised concerned what transpired on the floor yesterday. And it was the Deputy Senate President that presided, and he is here. I heard what he said, but not having seen the votes and proceedings, I'm not able to determine whether what he said, the announcement he made yesterday, was properly reflected in the votes of proceedings. So, Mr. President,
your point of order is sustained. So please, Clerk of the Senate, give him the. So the production crew claimed that the machine started heating up. So they are still bringing the votes and proceedings. So that was why I suggested that if you are sitting close to somebody who has it, look into it. But they will definitely give you before we close today. Please, your point of order is noted and sustained. Yes, Leader of the Senate. Chartered Institute of Healthcare Management of Nigeria Establishment Bill 2024, HB 1260, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate. Commission of National Accountants of Nigeria, ANAN, that's the Act Amendment Bill 2024, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President,
Rise the Women Council of Nigeria Establishment Bill 2024, SB 541, first reading taken. Clerk of the Senate. Leader of the Senate. Commission Act Amendment Bill 2024, SB 627, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, very distinguished senators,
distinguished colleagues, Federal National Planning Commission Act Amendment Bill 2024, SB 627, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate. Universities of Technology Act Amendment Bill 2024, first reading taken. Nigerian Export Processing Zones Act Bill 2024, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate, let me just point out that the Senior Senator Abamoro, together with members of your ad hoc committee of elders, you are allowed to proceed now to go and have your meeting with a view to engaging with the Attorney General of the Federation and the Chairman of FIRS. But please go with all the concerns you have collated, and thereafter you will be able to pass it to the Chairman of Finance Committee. In fact, he's also a member of that committee. The Chairman of Appropriation will also join you. So by the time we go into public hearings from next week or thereabout, we will have done a holistic job on it. And I must point out that we are not in a hurry to pass the bills because we want the bills to meet the test of time. We are not passing laws or acts of parliament here for a day. It is to lie beyond us. And so we must do thorough jobs on each and every bill that is presented before us. So let the public not come and do our work for us. We are elected to do the job, but we must do a thorough job to meet the aspirations of Nigerians and in the best interest of the nation. So please proceed to go and have your meetings. Thank you. Yes, Leader of the Senate. Leader of the Senate.
My distinguished colleagues, I rise to move that the Senate receives the report of the Committee on Power on the frequent collapse of the national grid and other related issues in the electricity sector. I so move.
Integrity, you may present your report. Summarize your report.
The report will be summarized, but we will need to also put the background for this report. This report was not ordered by the Senate, but is part of our oversight function and responsibilities under Order 96, Rule 54 of our standing orders as amended and Section 62 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which led us to invite the relevant stakeholders for an interactive session on Tuesday, October 29th. And Mr. President, this report, as everybody can see, is voluminous. So we'll go direct to page 9 and page 11, the findings and the recommendations, so that we'll go direct to the matter. Mr. President, before I go to page 9, let me also give this Senate and Nigerians an idea of what it costs us for every time there's a collapse of the national grid. Usually when the grid collapses, plants that produce electricity are shut down. And so we have gone to actually find out from the operators of the plants what it costs them when they shut down their plant. Whenever a plant is shut down, they will have to restart that plant, and to restart that plant, which they call a black start, it costs far more than running the plant. For example, for Azura, which is one of the plants that we use, while it costs $105,000 to run the plant, to restart it will cost Nigeria $7.5 million. So, for any time that we have a shutdown occasioned by a grid collapse, 3 plants in Nigeria that supply most of our electricity needs, the one in Azura, the one in Delta State, and the one in Shiroro, to restart the plants cost Nigeria $25 million, or in Naira terms, 42.5 billion Naira, just to restart the plant. And if we now extend it to the rest of the operating plants in Nigeria, the humongous money that is being spent in Nigeria for grid collapse is actually not quantifiable. And so today we want to go to the findings. What are those reasons that have led to incessant grid collapse? In page 9, you will find, number 1, aging infrastructure. Our grid is more than 50 years old, and therefore it's occasioned frequent breakdowns. Number 2, operational challenges. And this is worsened by power rejection by distribution companies due to their own issues. Number 3, abandoned projects in the power sector. We are presently undertaking by the Senate a comprehensive review of all abandoned projects in Nigeria, and what we see, we are saying trillions of dollars of abandoned projects. Number 4, regulatory gaps. We find also that all the agencies that are supposed to regulate the electricity sector have a lot of issues. Number 5, security of our power infrastructure. A short while ago, the whole of the North never had any power. Why? Because somebody cut the electricity grid, and what we see is that
people deliberately target our power lines and destroy them just to make the country ungovernable. Number 6, lack of a supervisory control and data acquisition system. This control system is called SCADA, and it is what gives anybody controlling the system what is going on within the system so that you can shut down or go forward. But it will interest you to know, Mr. President, that for 41 years, this country has continually paid for this SCADA, and it has never been finished. And right now, another contract has been signed by the World Bank for another SCADA system, which we have been continually striving with for 41 years. Number 7, financial prudence. We have seen that even with the amount of money coming from both internally and from the World Bank and from other donor agencies, we do not see the prudence in the spending of this. Number 8, the Presidential Power Initiative set up by Mr. President, former President, continuing with this particular President, we are yet to see any impact from it. And so we can go ahead, Mr. President, given all these anomalies that we have seen, to our recommendations. Recommendation 1, there is the urgent need for the Senate to take decisive action on this. And the Senate may urge Mr. President to convene a high-level situation room with all the critical stakeholders, because without power, we will not develop this country. Number 2, all the respective MDAs should produce a comprehensive report detailing how their previous allocations made to them for this particular SCADA system, which has been on and off for 41 years, has been used. Number 3, recommendation 3, that we must ensure that this SCADA technology is deployed fully so that we can eliminate all the real-time monitoring, response time, and every other thing that has bedeviled this sector. Number 4, that the Transmission Company of Nigeria should, in collaboration with NAPTIN, establish training programs for their technical personnel, especially for this, because we have found that also ignorance and lack of knowledge has helped in putting people who do not understand these systems to run such systems. Number 5, that the Senate should urge the relevant security and law enforcement agencies to develop a comprehensive strategy for the power infrastructure in Nigeria. At a particular time, Mr. President, I also propose on this floor to have a separate arm of government that will take care of power infrastructure. But I think at that time, it was stepped down under the David Mark regime because they said that it was the responsibility of civil defense to do that. But we can see today that it is impossible for civil defense to fight insurgents who go to break down the power infrastructure, especially in the north. And I think yesterday, we were also told by Bayelsa that for about 5 months or so, Bayelsa never had any power because all the critical lines going into Bayelsa were vandalized and brought down
by criminals. Number 6, that relevant stakeholders operating the national grid should adopt community engagement programs because it belongs to us, so that communities do not see it as their own. As a government infrastructure, not knowing that it affects their own lives. Number 7, that licensed operators in the power sector should prioritize investments in upgrading their infrastructure. We have noticed, Mr. President, that all the distribution companies have not invested in their infrastructure since they took over, since 2013 till date. And if you need power anywhere, you buy your own infrastructure, you buy your cable, you also buy your transformers, you buy everything, and government continues to invest, not seeing anything reciprocal from these people. And that DISCOs should adopt the transparent practices in load management and rejection. Because what we also noticed from our interaction was that distribution companies do not even accept power sometimes when they are being given. And that causes problem within the system, because when power is produced, it must go somewhere. It cannot be stored. And that also gives a problem to the system. That, number 9, that the electricity power regulation should implement performance-based incentives to the DISCOs to align with their financial interests. Number 10, that TCN and FGN Power should conduct a comprehensive review of all abandoned projects in the power sector so that we can have a smooth operation of the national grid. Number 11, that NEC should ensure strict enforcement mechanism for compliance with regulatory requirements for both the GENCOs, the TCN, and the DISCOs, and prescribed penalties must be imposed for non-compliance. Number 12, that stakeholders for the operation of the national grid, which include the GENCO, the TCN, should regularly do independent and self-assessment and audit of their compliance with regulatory requirements. Number 13, that to ensure financial prudence, accountability, and public trust, all agencies, that is TCN, FGN Power, Federal Ministry of Power, and other government entities who receive budgetary allocation from the National Assembly should periodically disclose to the public through financial reports related to the power sector investment, and that should include details of expenditures on project status, outcomes, and everything. Because we've also found that part of the issues is that they say that the people prefer to buy Jeeps, buy Hiluxes, buy all manners of vehicles, and not invest in the infrastructure itself with all the monies they have. And Mr. President, finally, that there should be a multifaceted approach which involves investment in infrastructure upgrade, strengthening the regulatory oversight, enhancing the security measures for the assets, and addressing the commercial practices of DISCOs while implementing modern monitoring systems to ensure a more resilient national grid. Mr. President, at the back of this report is also an attachment which we have put that will show to everyone everything concerning the power sector as an appendix, so that those who do not completely understand will also have an idea of everything that we have all stated concerning the power sector. I so submit, Mr. President.